everyone. I hope everyone is having a wonderful Tuesday and staying warm and dry, depending on whereabouts you are right now. I know, Amy, doesn't necessarily apply to you over in Australia, but it's been extra cold and snowy in Ontario and Quebec the last couple of days.
Quite the opposite in Melbourne.
Okay. It's a good time for us to encourage people to get away from the gross North American winter and head over there for the new school year.
Mm-hmm.
Perfect. All right. Well, I think we'll jump right into it. We've got quite a few people here, and if a couple more join later, that's fine as well. Guess we can start with some introductions. So I'm Victoria. I'm based out just outside of Toronto. I'm actually in Montreal right now. We're here for the McGill Career Fair tomorrow. I work on the North American team as a global opportunities consultant, meaning that I help all of our educators from North America who want to go teach in both Australia and the UK. I am also an Ontario certified teacher, and I taught in Melbourne myself back in 2023. Absolutely loved it, and now so lucky to get to do this full time and help other educators do the same. And all the way from Australia, Amy is joining me. Amy, do you want to share what you do for us over there?
Yes, so I'm Amy. I'm actually from New Zealand. So I've actually done some time in the UK myself when just before COVID, lived over there for a little bit, and then now I live in Melbourne. I've been here for about a year and a half now. So I do the recruitment in the south of Melbourne, and then we also support educators moving over as well. So whether that's those of you on the call from Canada or a lot of people from New Zealand, the UK, and Ireland too. And so, yeah, I tend to go to all of the events and things as well. So if you do make the move over, I will likely meet you when you get here at some point.
Amazing. Awesome. I know we've got quite a range of people on here, some that we haven't spoken to yet, some that we met at the career fairs that we've been to in the past couple of weeks, some that we've had initial conversations with. My goal today is to paint a high-level picture of opportunities for everyone, as far as what teaching in Australia can look like. We do also have a ton of webinars about specific questions. So if you are looking for ECE work or work in special education, we have webinars for all of those as well. So I can send that to you, and today we'll keep it pretty high level as far as what the process looks like, what opportunities there are for you in Australia. So we'll be talking about ANZUK UK, who we are, what we do, why go teach overseas, the different visa options, are locations available, types of work available, finding accommodation, the steps in your journey, and then as well any questions. If you do have questions as we're going through, feel free to drop them in the chat, and myself or Amy or any of our team members that are on the call today can try to answer you as we go. And if we don't get to them, we can always set up a call one-on-one to go through any questions. All right. So for those of you who we haven't had a chance to really talk to yet, ANZUK UK is a global operation that's been around for 20 years, 21 now, founded in 2004. We have over 300 staff globally, 21 offices. As Amy mentioned, we send North Americans to Australia, but we also send educators to the UK as well as New Zealand and support educators from all over the world going to these different locations. So it's a whole big team to help offer you 360-degree support all along your journey. This is our favorite question, why teach abroad? Amy must be so sick of me saying this now because I always say, why not teach abroad? It was truly one of the greatest experience that I had, hence why I'm here encouraging other educators to do it. But there's so many good reasons. The personal growth, being able to step outside of your comfort zone, do something you might have never thought you would do is a great opportunity. It's also great for career development. A lot of our teachers who go over are brand new teachers straight out of their Bachelor of Education. It's a great way to get some experience, whether you want to be a daily supply teacher or you want to have a contract. There's opportunities for you to grow as a teacher, build your resources, and be ready when you want to come back to Canada, if you want to come back. And the life experience, make friends from all over the world, travel, see a different country. Australia is so far away. It is so worth it if you are going to go and live there for 6 months, a year, and get that whole experience. And you can see Asia, New Zealand, and all of that while you're there as well. All right. Okay, so for work options, ANZ UK does offer quite a range of work options. For today's webinar, I'm mainly going to be focusing on teaching. However, we do also offer early childhood support staff roles. They call them teaching assistants, also known as educational assistants in Canada. But the education requirements for being a TA are different. So something we can talk about if you have friends or partners who want to go over with you but aren't necessarily trained in education. We also have OSHC, which is outside of school hours care, I believe, and then executive opportunities as well. All right, the visas. So the great news is to work in Australia, you really only need two things, working rights and then your teaching license. So we'll go into both of those. Most of our educators who are going to Australia go on a working holiday visa. So for Canadian educators, it's the 417 working holiday visa, and that's eligible for everyone up to 35, inclusive of your 35th year. So you just need to apply before your 36th birthday. For US educators, it's the 462. You only get it till 30, unfortunately. So a bit of a shorter time span, again, inclusive of that 30th year. The cost is currently 650 Australian. I'm not going to do the dollar conversion because there's too much happening with the Canadian dollar and the US dollar and everything. So 650 Australian. All you really need to apply for this visa is proof that you have access to $5,000 in funds, essentially just proving to the government that if you get yourself into the country, you'll be able to manage. That's also what we recommend to have just to kind of have a cushion for when you arrive. But other than that, really easy visa to apply for. Processing times tend to be quite quick, and it gives you 1 year in Australia. And then there are ways to extend that we can talk about if you want to stay a bit longer. If you have already used your working holiday visa or you have aged out of the working holiday visa option, there are a few more options. I'm going to quickly talk about these visas. If you are interested in permanent opportunities like sponsorship or skilled worker, I do have a permanent webinar that I can send you. We have a team that works specifically within these roles, but we are not visa agents, so I can't recommend any visa option. I can't really answer in-depth questions about how the visas work. I can just give you information so that you can go and peruse it on your own. So, 482 sponsorship visa. This is essentially where a school will sponsor you to come over, work on a contract. It has pathways to permanent residency. If you are a primary teacher, it's a 2-year contract. If you are a secondary teacher, it is a 4-year contract. So you're signing a contract with a school that you're going to complete that amount of time with that school in that job. And then once you've done that, there are pathways for you to stay in Australia if you would like. This is a wonderful visa, however, not always the easiest to come by. So in-demand roles right now are going to be secondary, math, sciences, English. If you work in special education, that's another huge one that's in demand. But a lot of these come up around North American fall time for the coming school year, which starts at the end of January. If you want a bit more flexibility, you don't want to be sponsored by a school, you want to come over on your own, Australia is always looking for more teachers, so they do have a skilled worker visa. They actually have a couple, depending on if you want to go state specific or for all of Australia. Essentially, it's a points-based visa. You apply once you have become a teacher, so you need to be after your BEd, you need to be already a qualified teacher. It's quite a process. It takes some time. It has high costs, but it really grants you full working rights. It has pathways to permanent residency, citizenship as well. So if you know that Australia is where you want to be long term or for the rest of your life, this is a really great way to gain entry into the country, and then we can still help you land your dream role. But this kind of opens up your opportunities across the board. Awesome. Okay, location options. Again, this is going to depend on what type of work you are going over for. Most of our educators are going to end up down in Victoria. It's where there is the highest demand for educators, but we also have some work in New South Wales, Sydney specifically. Like I said, we have a Sydney specific webinar. So if you are interested in Sydney, I can send that along to you. We also are getting some more work up in Queensland. We are starting to move some more work in Western Australia in Perth. And then there's ECE work really all over the country. So if you are in early childhood, it's a great opportunity to get to travel and work and see more of Australia. Okay, this is my last thing, and then I'll stop talking and let Amy chat for a little bit. As I mentioned, to teach in Australia, you need two things. Your working rights, which will be your visa. The second thing is your teaching license. So each state has their own board that manages their teaching licenses, but it's pretty much the same minimum requirements across the board. 4 years of postgraduate education, at least one of those years needs to be an initial teacher education program, and a minimum of 45 days of supervised practice teaching, practicums, internships, depending on what school you went to. Most Canadian universities follow this really, really well. For US educators, it's a bit trickier to make sure that your qualifications do actually line up. But for Canadians, most follow this pretty well. Most of our educators, as I mentioned, go to the state of Victoria, where Melbourne is. If you are teaching there, you are applying to the VIT for your teaching license. The application process isn't too hard, similar to applying to your local teaching board, your OCT, BC teaching certificate, wherever you are. You can only apply within 3 months of actually arriving. So when you're about 3 months out from arrival, you fill in the online application, send transcripts, police checks, all of that stuff, and it typically gets approved within 6 to 10 weeks, I'm going to say, is the average time. Depending on time of the year, if you're arriving in busier times, it can take longer. If you're arriving in the down season, it can be quicker. So just depends on when you're arriving, but we are also there to support you with that and help answer any questions that you have about that application system. All right, I'll stop talking so much. Amy, do you want to tell us a bit more about Melbourne and Victoria and everything that's going on there?
Absolutely. So I moved to Melbourne about a year and a half ago, and I've been working in this team for about a year. So I support in the schools team, which is primary, secondary, and special education. And then we do also have an early childhood division here as well, and a permanent recruitment team. So our permanent recruitment team, they focus more on the independent schools, looking at a lot of secondary roles, which would be sort of subject specific. So they get a lot of term long contracts. So if you were moving over and you were interested in, I guess, a block in an independent school, that's a team we could refer you over to. Otherwise, yeah, a lot of the work is sort of day-to-day relief work. So that's our sort of biggest business. That's sort of what we started here in Melbourne. In terms of the work that we have as well, I guess primary and secondary. So times of the year, it does sort of change a little bit demand-wise. We run a school year, which is the same as the calendar year. So schools for us started back last week, and so we're into week 2 now of term 1. Weeks 1 to 3 of this term are fairly quiet. We do have some people who have been pre-booked into schools already. Day-to-day bookings definitely do start off quite quiet. So if you are moving over in the summer months, it's just sort of being aware that this is an amazing time to be in Melbourne weather-wise. However, the work at the start of the year is quieter. And then on the flip side of that as well, if you think about December, if you're a secondary school teacher, when we hit exam time from week 6 sort of term 4, secondary work tends to drop off sort of entirely, and then it would be primary work. So kind of being flexible to different things in special education as well, if you are moving over, really helps kind of you secure more continuous CRT work. For a bit of insight into Melbourne's weather, which I'm sure you're probably aware of, we've had 38 degrees on Sunday, 36 degrees yesterday, but then last night it dropped down to 20 degrees, and today it's like a high of 23. So it's quite all over the show. Can be incredibly hot, and then also just very mild. So yeah, we've had an amazing summer though, like a huge amount of over 30-degree days, and it's been very consistent. Whereas when I moved over a year ago, it wasn't quite like that at all. So yeah, I guess it's very turbulent, but it
I feel like that
balances out.
describes
Yeah.
Melbourne weather very well.
Yeah, but there's yeah, I
Another
guess.
just gonna say another good thing to point out on the school year calendar that we might not be used to in Canada. With their 4 terms, they get a 2-week break in between each term as well. That's highlighted on here, which is really, really nice if you do want to go and travel to New Zealand or do something else. It adds nice breaks up throughout the year as opposed to our like we get 1 week for March break and that's kind of it. So it's a nicer,
Whoa.
I know, it's a nicer stagger of the school year.
With that as well, in terms of the busiest times of year here for casual relief teaching, terms 2 and terms 3, you would most likely be working 5 days a week very consistently. And yeah, and if you are open to kind of, like I say, different settings, so if we work with quite a few different faith-based schools, if you're open to working in Catholic environments, Islamic, Jewish schools, I mean, all of these schools love their international educators and they do have a lot of work. So, yeah, if you're flexible, kind of willing to jump into anything, you'll get as much work as you want during terms 2 and terms 3, and then terms 1 and terms 4 around those busy periods as well. So generally the way it works is when we kind of onboard anyone here is we would go over what your preferences are. So even if you start doing day-to-day supply work, a lot of schools, if they do really like you, they can actually request for you to stay there for the rest of the term. So there is a lot of opportunity for consistency, even though you are doing supply work, especially in special education as well, because as I'm sure you're aware, if you have worked in those settings, it's really great for the kids to have consistency. So once the school sort of does have a teacher and they really like them, they will tend to pre-book them for blocks as much as they can, if that's something that you're happy to take on as well. And then we do get, like I talked about, sort of term long contracts as well. So that might be long service leave. We might have someone going off on leave for 3 months. That maybe that's like a grade 2 teacher that we need. And if that's something that you've specified that you'd be interested in, we can then, I guess, put you forward for those positions as well. Um, and then our permanent team, they are working in the independent sector, and more with kind of longer term opportunities. Sometimes it might be sort of a year long block, or it might be term by term or something kind of ongoing. But I guess thinking about ongoing roles, if you only have a working holiday visa, there are some working restrictions with that. So yeah, um, although you might come over on sort of that temporary visa as well, we do work with schools that offer sponsorship. So if you did get to Melbourne and you decided you really loved it, there are schools that we could introduce you to for some casual relief days that do offer sponsorship if you did decide you wanted to go down that pathway. But that does mean you're kind of sponsored by that school and you sort of stay with that school for whatever period is agreed with the school. Usually I think it's about 2 years. But yeah, I think dependent on kind of that arrangement. Can't speak to it in detail, unfortunately.
No, that's fine. Like I said, if for those who want the permanent, we have our permanent team in Melbourne, and we also did a webinar with them. So if you're over here in North America still thinking about that, you can watch that one for more information about that. Yes, so sponsorship is available for international educators. Samuel, you do need, again, those qualifications for teaching, and you also need at least a year of experience. It used to be 2 years. They recently dropped it to 1 year. So once you've got a year of experience, then you are eligible for sponsored roles.
It just sort of depends on the school. So a lot of, I guess, different areas in Melbourne as well, as you can imagine, have more of a need for casual relief teachers. So in the central areas of Melbourne, kind of, I guess, really popular for everyone to move around that sort of CBD area. But that's kind of not really where the need for CRTs are, as kind of everyone wants to work there. So at the moment out west, there's a big sort of development going on there. So for example, we just had 5 new schools brought on in the last year in the west. So they have a greater need for teachers, and they're more likely to do sponsorship at the moment because there isn't enough teachers to kind of fulfill that region. Um, sorry, I'm not sure what that question was.
Oh, that's okay. Zena, I'm not sure. I will talk to our permanent opportunities team and find out if subbing counts or if it needs to be full-time teaching.
Yeah, I'm actually not too sure about that either, but our permanent team would be able to help with that.
Yeah.
So we use an app here, and it's actually the same app. It's kind of used everywhere for ANZ UK. So it's our development team do everything in-house here. So we're really lucky that we have great technology to work with. You can choose your own schedule that you work. So if you decided you didn't want to work Fridays, you could just block off Fridays for the year. We do have guaranteed work programs here as well. So especially during those busier times, obviously for us, we really want everyone to work with us. We want to be able to support you when you are teaching over here. And what that means is we're kind of guaranteeing to you that we might get sort of 3 to 5 days a week. And in turn for us, you're an educator that we rely on the morning of typically to support in a wide range of schools. So special education, primary and secondary. It just means you know you're going to get the work, but it does mean that you're also kind of flexible to do something different every day and kind of jump into whatever we need you to do.
Awesome. And I will say, just like personal experience, I did the ambassador program when I was there teaching. I taught everything from kinder, what they call prep, through year 12 and special education, a bit of everything. And it was a phenomenal way to find out what I wanted to teach when I came back to Canada and to gain experience and to try things I didn't think that I would necessarily try, find out what I liked, find out what I didn't like. So the flexibility is really great to push yourself as a teacher and to also be guaranteed more work. Already kind of spoken to contracts and permanent, but
Yeah, so I guess with that, our casual relief team, we do get contracts, and then we also have a permanent team who focuses more with the independent schools. So there is a lot of different blocks that come up all the time with us. Generally, if a school sort of might do their own advertising, they might come to us as well and ask for support with anyone they know that we've been working with who would be a great teacher for them. So yeah, really just about you being, I guess, open and transparent about what you really want while you're here so that we can do the best job to support you with your preferences.
okay. Before we jump into finding somewhere to live, we also didn't really talk too much about pay rates. There is a range, and if you are doing daily CRT work, it's going to be different than if you are coming over on a sponsored contract from a school, which would be assigned salary. So that's absolutely something we can talk about in our initial conversations. But Australia is known. They do pay their teachers quite well. Right now, the starting rate, I believe, is $3.98 Australian per day for new teachers. And that goes up fairly consistently as well. So the pay is quite nice, which obviously is going to play in with finding somewhere to live. Australia is not a cheap country, though my argument for that is always neither is Canada, especially for those of us living in Ontario, Quebec, British Columbia. So I found from personal experience the pay and the accommodation very much equaled out. It was very comfortable to afford to work and live there. But obviously that's an important thing to consider before moving. Finding somewhere to live. Obviously, Amy, you moved over there recently-ish. Do you want to talk about finding accommodation, how that is?
Yeah,
all that
definitely.
good
So
stuff.
I was going to say as well, just quickly on the pay rate. So we do it off years of teaching here for casual relief teaching. So Australia has award rates that we sort of work in line with. So if you're a more experienced teacher, you do get paid a higher rate, I guess, based on your experience back home. But yeah, so when I moved over, I was, yes, your years of experience back home transfer. So what you do is you get statements of service, and it might be a letter from the school that says, for example, Victoria worked at this school as a full-time teacher for X amount of years, and then for us that might calculate towards, I don't know, 4 years of teaching. So yeah, that's kind of how we do our pay rates here. So each kind of year of teaching is different breakdowns, but as Victoria said, if you go through your initial conversations, we can share some of that information with you in more detail. Um, in terms of, yeah, finding somewhere to live, I guess we always recommend looking at major train stations as kind of your hub to be able to get out to schools, because you want to be able to access more schools. So being close to a station which has multiple lines through it is going to be preferable to be able to get to all different areas of Melbourne. Initially, what's really good is, I guess, having maybe an Airbnb for like a week or two near one of those central stations, and then kind of, I guess, looking at places around there. There's a few different really good websites you can join, like these Facebook groups and things that are listed here, where you can look at house shares, which is, I guess, quite an affordable way of living across here. Um, Looking at new leases, I'd recommend not necessarily doing that until you get here, just because if you're locked into something longer term and you decided you didn't like the area, having applied before you even get here, then I guess you don't have so much freedom. So definitely good to kind of look at something temporary in a really great space where you could potentially get to some schools before you sort of look at something longer term. Times of year as well. We're finding this time of year is incredibly competitive because it is summer, so everyone's moving over. So it can be a little bit more difficult to find a place to live. However, kind of as you get into the winter months, the rental market eases a lot and it seems to be a lot easier to find a place to live. So, yeah, I guess something to kind of think about, that you do need to be quite organised if you are moving over in the summer months, as you are competing with hundreds of other teachers who are here enjoying Melbourne summer.
Just on that, two things on the question. Yes. So once you're registered to work with us, we'll invite you. That's a private Facebook group, the Educators Moving to Oz. I can also speak. I moved to Melbourne December 23rd of 2022. I had a sublet and then I started looking for housing. It was extremely competitive. I mean, I actually did a whole 30-minute long webinar just about finding accommodation, so I can absolutely include that in my email to everyone. But I said the biggest thing is casting a wide net. You send a lots of messages, you'll get some back. Some people won't respond to you. It's competitive, so I always say it's hard but not difficult. You had to put in the work, you had to put in the time
Mm-hmm.
to actually send all the messages. But even though there's 100 people who are posting, there was also 100 posts going up every day. So it was about being on the groups, sending the messages, going to the places. And again, with the flexibility part of being flexible with where you want to teach, the more flexible you can be with where you want to live. I ended up living in the northern suburbs, which wasn't what I had thought I was going to do when I first moved over there. And I absolutely loved it. So I'm really, really happy I did. But just having some openness and some willingness when you are searching makes it, of course, a lot easier. As Amy mentioned, public transport is going to be the way that most of our educators get to and from schools. They have a phenomenal trains, trams, and buses system there, well beyond any Canadian city that I've been to. So really easy to get around using public transport, but also if you can get a bike, it's a great way to get around. They don't have snow, so you can bike year round. They do get rain though, so maybe bring a rain jacket. by foot, and a car. Not many of our educators who are going over short term end up getting a car, but if you are living outside of the city, want to live in more regional areas, cars might be a good option. When you register with us, yes, you'll get to join our Facebook groups, and we have area guides that have information about the different areas and where to live, rent prices, tips, all of those good things.
With
Okay.
that as well, just quickly on the public transport
Yes.
here, it's really affordable. So it's 10 Australia, I think it's $5.50 one way, but that's travel kind of anywhere in Melbourne for 2 hours. So generally, if you're going to and from schools, it's about $11 a day to get there and back, and kind of anything you did after work as well. Your Mikey, which is the transport card here, caps at that. So yeah, it's very affordable to use public transport here.
Awesome. Perfect. Okay. So that is kind of the high level information of how you get work in Australia, what the work looks like, what the process looks like. Here is what our process would look like. So from here, you'd book in for initial contact and interview with our North American team. So we're actually almost all on the call tonight. So it's myself, Olivia, Cooper, and Donald. All of us are Canadian teachers who have taught abroad who do this now. We'll set up an initial call with you to answer any additional questions you have. Again, go into specifics with timelines, when you want to go over what type of your work you're looking for. Our interview, go over any of the processing steps there. Once you have had that call, have had an interview with us, you'll be set to register to join all the other educators who are going with ANZUK. Once you're registered, we do run references to make sure that you are good, that we want to support you and back you. Once you're registered, you will also get our registration guide, which has all of our information as far as applying for your visa, applying for your teaching license, information about banking, all the kind of little things that you might not think about before making the move will help cover with you on the Canadian North American side. Once you're getting a little bit closer to actually arriving, you'll also get reached out to from a global consultant, someone like Amy, who is going to chat with you to say, you know, is this still the kind of work you're looking for? Do you want to be doing CRT work, which is casual relief teaching? Are you open to primary, secondary, special education? Asking all those questions so that you can be ready to start working when you arrive. Kind of in line with that is also the compliance. So as I said, 3 months before you can apply for your teaching license. Typically, we recommend 6 months before for that working holiday visa. So making sure that all of the compliance stuff so you can actually be a legal working teacher in Australia is done before you arrive in Australia. Step 5, you'll be there, you're cleared to work, you can actually go into our offices, meet with your consultant, get set up on the app, do any paperwork that needs to be done, and then you'll be ready to go into the classroom. We also have social events, which I'll talk to in a second, and professional development sessions as well for you to attend while you're there if you want to learn more and enhance your teaching skills. Actually, on that one, I remembered that we did have a question about curriculum and how different the curriculum is between Canada and Australia. Again, we can speak about it one-on-one as far as subjects and things. The curriculum doesn't have huge changes unless you're teaching country-specific subjects, you know, like the histories, geography, indigenous studies. Primary is going to be very, very similar. The biggest difference is the types of classrooms. They have a lot more student-led learning, a lot more interactive learning. So it's not a huge shift for those who might be nervous as new teachers. A lot of it's still the same, but I also think that they're doing some things better over there than we are doing here. All right, Amy, do you want to brag about ANZUK for a little bit, and then I'll finish it off with our events?
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, we have a really great network of schools here. So I guess a lot of us here, there's quite a few internationals in the office as well, lots of Kiwis, lots of people who have done similar things. So we are all kind of, not that I'm a teacher myself, but I've lived overseas, understand kind of the process of moving around. And a lot of my workmates here, if they're not from Ireland or the UK, they're Kiwis who may have lived over there, and the same with Australian staff. Most of them have been teachers over there as well. We've started in Melbourne 20 years ago. The person who started our company, Dan Mundy, he still works with us. He's in the office every week, and he started it from his bedroom. So very passionate teacher. I guess we try and have a really social time here as well with events every term. So everyone who's moving over, we try and connect you with other teachers so that you're not kind of feeling alone at all. And yeah, I guess we try and support like having contact with someone on ground here in Melbourne and then someone from where you're coming from as well. So you can get as much information as you have before you get here, and then kind of making you feel comfortable as soon as you land as well, coming into the offices and meeting some of the people that you'll be working with. But yeah, it's fantastic. Move to Melbourne.
Agree.
You'll never regret
I
it.
totally agree. Awesome. With the events in the community, as Amy said, with the social aspect of it, obviously this is a huge part of moving abroad as well. We have our Facebook group. We here in Canada try to do pre-departure events. We do lots of just like have a drink and meet, but we're also expanding. We did Pilates and Pints in Toronto last summer. We did a sauna and cold plunge in Vancouver in the fall. So it's a great way to get to meet some other educators who are heading over before you actually go. And then once you arrive, there's also events at least every quarter. I know there was just one maybe last week or a week and a half ago that I saw our international educators were at down in Melbourne to get to meet some other teachers. Obviously, it's hard with being a teacher. You're spending most of your day with small kids and not with other adults. So really nice to get to spend some time and meet some other educators from all over the world who are doing the same thing that you are. Okay, questions. I saw some pop up in the chat. I know that our team has been answering them. Yeah, we don't have anything planned for Montreal right now, but would love to get one. Families moving. So, Billy, I'll send you as well the permanent opportunities webinar. The skilled visa and the sponsorship visa both have opportunities to move over with dependents. There's also some programs that offer financial assistance in moving over. So it's definitely something that you can look into. Okay, educational consultants who will support you. That's a great question, Zena. I wouldn't say there is a specific consultant who can help you develop it. We do have online resources that you can look into to help with the Australian curriculum. And then we have our support network of teachers as well to support you with adjusting over, but not necessarily a specific person in that type of role. Page with, sorry, go ahead, Amy.
I was just going to say, if you start with casual relief work, if you are just sort of doing one-off days, you do sort of get to go into different classrooms across the day sometimes. So it's a really good way to kind of just follow a lesson plan and adjust to the way of teaching there. And sometimes you'll be team teaching as well at different schools. So each environment is a little bit different, but there generally is someone like at the school that you'd be able to get support from when you get there as well.
Perfect. Page with the commute times. So on the ambassador contract, the maximum commute time is 75 minutes that you'd be looking to commute just for that guaranteed supply work.
Generally, it does depend on sort of where you've chosen to live as well. Like if you are near one of those really central train hubs, that's going to make your commute time a lot less. If you're yeah, making sure that you make yourself easily accessible to our train networks is kind of the key to ensuring your commute is much easier.
Perfect. Jawad asked about the employer. So you are employed by us. Essentially, think of us as acting as a school board. So we are working with hundreds of schools to help find you roles. We do have several offices in Melbourne specifically.
We've got
Um,
4 in Melbourne.
four. Okay, so
Well,
yes, we
3
have.
in Melbourne, 1 in Geelong, but yeah.
Okay. But yes, and you can actually go into the office, meet the consultants. They're real people on the ground to help you with all of your questions there. Long-term supply at one school, how long is the term? So most school terms are that 9 to 10 weeks, about 3 months of the calendar year, give or take with the breaks. But a contract term can be a range. I mean, I did some that were 3 weeks covering long service leave, going up to multi-term. Brisbane Trinity, wonderful location. We do have some contract work there. We don't have the same casual relief teaching up in Brisbane, unfortunately. So not quite as much. Melbourne is definitely the prime spot for teachers, but it's something that we can talk about if that's, a place that you are really, really keen on. Skilled worker for over 45. I think that there's only pathways to permanent residency in certain areas. If you are over 45, I forget what the acronym is. We definitely talk about it in our permanent opportunities webinar, so I can send that to you as well. I think Olivia answered you, Paige, there.
In terms of sort of contracts and things, if you were booked in for a term at a school, you'd usually still sort of go through us. So you'd actually be booked through the agency. If it was something a little bit longer than that, the school might employ you directly, and you would then be liaising with the school in terms of any kind of, I guess, specific things that the school were after or you were wanting from the school. If that makes sense. So we'd kind of do the initial introduction, and then if the school wanted to take you on board, you would be negotiating with them.
There's a few more. I think some things are also more, it's going to depend on if you are here on a working holiday visa and you're a short term, or if you're talking about long term permanent opportunities. These things are also going to depend. Trinity, for the short term contract, ideally you can't really be taking like a week's worth of vacation off. That would be more where being a CRT would come into play if you want to have that flexibility to take school time off to go and travel. If you're signing a contract with a school to state, I'll be there to work through whatever dates, you're expected, obviously sick leave can happen, all of this stuff, no one is immune from that. But if you're signing a contract to say that I'm going to be there from this date to this date, you're expected to be there to work from that date to that date. If you had something pre-booked, it could be negotiated or talked about with the school beforehand of saying, I've already booked a vacation for these dates. Are you still open to that? Then it can be looked at, but typically you can't be taking time off during that time. We are also having a New Zealand webinar in 2 weeks. So if you are looking at New Zealand, Mauricio, definitely come to that one as well. And we'll be talking about their visas and teaching licenses and all of that stuff because it is a bit different. Okay, for the sake of time, it's 7:45 or whatever your local time is. So I'll wrap it up here. Thank you so much, Amy, and thank you, Olivia and Donald and Cooper and everyone in the chat. Thank you all who joined tonight. I will send a copy of the recording so that you can have this in one spot. If you do have specific questions that we didn't get to, please let us know. Our email is in the chat there, ca@anzuk.education. We can set up a one-on-one call to go over specifics, timelines, talk about our experiences, and find what will work for you. Thank you all so much. Oh, yes, check your junk mail. Thanks, Olivia. It goes, oh, Keith, my favorite, 2025 motto, hashtag move to Melbourne. Big fan.
Thanks so
Big
much, everyone,
fan.
for joining. This has been
Thank you.
great.
Thank you all. Thank you. Thank you. Have a wonderful night and stay warm.